Hi. Wait till everyone joins in. Hopefully we don't wake him up. He can hear us still. Cool. Awesome. I can see me there and I can see me there. Hi everyone. I'm in a different spot tonight because it was really cold in the other room and Mick went back to work today. He went back to work yesterday and it's been chaotic. It's so much harder having people at work out of the house and awesome at the same time. So we're going to talk a bit quietly because Banjo is only just going to bed. He's had a late one. And hopefully the sound is working for everyone tonight. So welcome to the final countdown. Final episode. I thought I'd dress up this evening in my best post-birth outfit. So this is the best post-birth outfit I could come up with because I've actually washed my hair. So post-birth, that doesn't happen very often. So this is like a highlight of post-birth. I didn't get the shower by myself, which is also another highlight of post-birth. I had 2 robots come in whilst I was showering. They had robot cups. They had plastic cups over their hands and they were being robots. I normally get really annoyed because they like to come in all the time when I'm having a shower, and the shower is like one place where I'm like, just let me be. But they were a bit cute. So it was Mr. Cornfloor and Banjo, obviously, being the robots. And I'm in my PJs because, let's face it, post-birth is either PJs or activewear. So, welcome to the post-birth episode. I feel like this could be a series on itself. I feel like there probably needs to be 20 episodes on this, but I'm sticking to our typical post-birth care and only providing you with one. And that's really what post-birth is like. Our postnatal care in Australia and worldwide leaves a lot to be desired, especially for the woman. And, you think about how many appointments you have during your pregnancy, how much care you have during your labour and birth, and then what you get post-birth. And for the majority of people, they get 1 appointment. And in terms of support, it very quickly becomes about the baby. The only people I really feel that care about new mums is other new mums, because we know what it's like, and the rest of us try and block it out. So I'm taking my midwifery hat off tonight. I am being a mum and giving my experiences and chatting really rawly, that's a word, and honestly, about what it was like for me, and some supports out there, and hopefully some things that can help you. It is by no means going to cover it the way it should, and I try really hard on my Facebook and Instagram pages to be real and raw, and give you information that I think you guys want. So if there's posts that you want me to do things on, please get in touch. And obviously during this pregnancy and post-birth, I'll be being as honest and raw as I am and sharing lots of things there. I will say you parent every child differently. And I say this as a midwife to couples. How you parent your first child is not how you parent your second, nor how you parent your third. Just like when you start a new job and then you change companies or go to a different workplace, you'll do your job better the more experienced you get, and as time goes by. So it's just something to keep in mind if you are struggling right now during your first episode of parenthood. I put up this post today, and an amazing friend who I met from doing my classes. She came to my pregnancy classes. She's sitting over there, that's why I'm looking. We're socially distancing. Thank you very much. 1.5 metres, we measured it, we got the tape measure out. she came to my pregnancy classes, and then you did Restore post-birth. She kind of popped up a comment today and said, do you want me to share, would you like me to share my experiences with postnatal depression, and especially considering I didn't expect to have it. And I was like, do you want to come over, because you're allowed to do that now, I'm in Victoria, that's allowed to happen, and we'll just have a chat, because a lot of you commented about postnatal depression. It affects 1 in 7, and before we go on, I want to say that if you think you're experiencing it now, please seek help. Beyond Blue is an amazing website, and there are several others, and you need Panda. Yeah, I was going to say Panda, and then I was like, it is Panda. I'm going to pop a whole lot of resources about things that we talk about tonight up for support, but Beyond Blue and Panda are your 2 go-tos, and they are still running, and you can contact them via phone. We'll also say that the best person that often picks up on your postnatal depression is your partner, because they notice the change. But when partners often suggest that that may be an issue, it can cause issues in the relationship. Partners can get their heads bitten off for suggesting it. It can be a really, really hard thing for partners to bring up. And so if you're watching this and you think it's you, or you remember this episode when you do think that you might be experiencing it, or maybe you don't think you're experiencing it, but your partner brings it up, please know that it's coming from a place of love and support. And they only want what's best for you. If you're a partner and you are struggling to bring it up, please get in touch with somebody who is really close with your partner. So a sister, a cousin, an auntie, a mother, a friend, who may have who may be listened to a little bit better, because we all love our partners, but we don't all love our partners, actually. Some people don't. I love mine today, despite getting the wrong twisties, if you've been following my stories. But sometimes other people can be heard differently. But partners are the best people to bring it up, because they are around them the most. And it is really hard to hide postnatal depression from someone you live with. It can be easy to hide it from people when you go out for a coffee for an hour, or you see someone in the supermarket, but it's really hard to hide from someone who lives with you. So 1 in 7 people are affected by it. I've said that. Olivia, my dear friend, didn't think she was going to get it, so I'm going to turn the camera onto her. So everyone say hi to Olivia.
Hi. I was nervous about coming on because I feel like I don't have the star power that you're used to watching with B, but I'll do my best to be witty and entertaining.
They all want Mr. Core and Floor, but
I'm sure I'll try and fill the gap until he arrives.
We should have put a beard on you or something.
Oh, I could.
So why didn't you think you were going to get it?
Well, so my background, I'm a sonographer, so my background is in science. I'm logical, I always have been. I've never had a history of mental health issues like through teenager years and all that sort of stuff. I've never had a problem with my own, fighting my own brain. It's never been an issue for me. I had a fantastic pregnancy, a really beautiful, empowering birth. I've got a great husband, great supportive family around. I didn't have any risk factors aside from the fact that I'd had a baby. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't something that happened straight away either. It wasn't quick, it wasn't immediate, it wasn't newborn stages. It was later that it happened to me. It was it's hard to say, because it's looking back you realise. Hi, Mr. Corenfloor.
She got to see him.
What a treat. Probably happened from about 4 months onwards, but about 6 months was when it started getting nasty, and it wasn't until 8 months that I finally went to the doctor. Yeah. My husband and I had joked about it before giving birth, that I'd read about it, I'd seen people sharing their stories, I'd seen a really horrible story about a woman who died from it, and it really affected me reading about her story. But I half mentioned to Ro in a joke that, if I ever start to feel like this, I promise I'll let you know, and you have to let me know. And we made that agreement beforehand, but it wasn't half jest because it just so wasn't going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
And it bloody did. It bloody did. So it was, it's all things that at the time they were because I was tired or because I was a bad person or because I was a shitty mum, you know. It was all this, it all made sense in context. And that, like I started having some really sort of unsettling thoughts and feelings about things, and they happened for a while. And it sort of came to a crux, but still, even when it was really nasty, I probably still wouldn't have done anything. The tipping point was actually having a friend come to visit. She actually works at the hospital as well. She's a locum sonographer that comes at times. And so she hadn't seen me for a few months.
Yeah.
And she spotted it straight away.
Sorry, Mr. Cornfloor's cracking a beer whilst Olivia's pouring out her
fine. No, it's
heart.
fine. It's good. It's therapeutic. No,
Would you
all
like
good.
one?
No, thank you. I'm good.
We've kicked him out now. Hopefully everyone can hear. Sorry.
Yeah.
So a friend came over.
Yeah. She came. She hadn't seen me in a while, and she spotted the difference straight away. And she was really deeply concerned. Like she said, like, Liv, what is going on? Like, are you okay? Are you well? Are you this and that? And at the start, I was sort of like, of course, what are you talking about? I'm fine. And she persisted, and it was that, and it was my best friend back home in New Zealand was messaging saying, are you all right? Like, you sound different in your messages. I'd been having lots of nightmares, and she was like, why is that? And she was really probing. And then the final thing was I saw my GP. About something else, like for my daughter actually, and he looked at me and asked me, and because he saw it straight away, I was very different to how I normally was. Yeah. And so he asked that question in just the way that, you know, his years of experience have done. Yep. And he really saw me and how I wasn't anymore. Yeah. And so that was the really saving thing. I mean, it's amazing how you can justify the things that you think and feel to yourself, because going through parenting for your first time, you have no idea what's normal. I mean, we had and still have a poor sleeper, so it's so easy to blame everything on being tired. Yeah. But, and you know, I think if we'd had the ideal sleeper that you hear about in fairy tales,
it doesn't exist.
It would have been easier in that we wouldn't have had that to blame it on. But it still would have happened. Yeah. Like, it very much still would have been there. It's not that I was so tired that I was emotional. It was definitely there anyway. Yeah. It's just that was the excuse that we blamed things on for the whole time.
And so what did you do about it? What did the GP do?
The first thing that he did was actually leave it in my court. He said, you know, he was concerned about me. You don't seem right. Have you spoken to anybody? Have you done this and that? He said, think about it over the weekend. I saw him on a Friday. Think about it over the weekend and call me on Monday if you want to see me again. Left it up to me. There was no pressure, anything like that. Yeah. Thought about it over the weekend, and I texted him on Sunday night, and he got me in first thing Monday morning. And the first step for us was starting sertraline, which is the common first step antidepressant, just on a half dose for a couple of weeks, and then moving up to a fuller strength dose, and that was like magic. And at the same time as that, I was also starting to see, what is her title? She's a maternal mental health nurse, I think. Okay. A local woman. So we're very lucky to have that service. I don't know what that service is extrapolated across the states. Yeah. So we're very lucky to have her locally, and she was really fantastic and really helped me to unpack things and also feel like it wasn't just me being defunct. It was really a thing that was happening to me. It wasn't me doing this thing.
And did you see a psychologist as well, or not? Just
no, I didn't. Just the mental health nurse. Yeah.
And did you ever access Beyond Blue or Panda or anything like that?
I did. That was actually one of the first. I did Beyond Blue's. They have like a little self-assessment tool that you can do. Yeah. The Edinburgh
Yes,
score,
they do.
I think it's called.
Yeah,
Is that what it is?
postnatal.
Yeah.
So the Edinburgh postnatal score is something that you may do during your pregnancy. Often it's part of antenatal care that you get given it to check for antenatal depression too, because that's an actual thing that often gets dismissed and not really talked about. And then the postnatal depression score is something that you should have at least once in the first 6 weeks post-birth, and then again if you are feeling unwell mentally.
Yeah. I don't overtly recall having done one prior to the point of, this is my friend in New Zealand, so I mean she works in mental health as an OT, and so she was prompting me to say, why don't you do this? And it didn't come back very favourably, and that kind of made me go, this is a qualitative thing which my science brain likes, and this is saying that I'm not that good actually. And that made the wheels start turning. That's after that I contacted, I think, my maternal child health nurse first, and then she recommended a couple of things, one of which was the Agnes unit, which terrified me straight away. I was like, oh my God, like this is like I can't do that, like that's for people that are unwell, and I'm not unwell, like that wouldn't be me. And the other thing was to talk to the mental health nurse who we've got, and so I did eventually use her. So there was a few months of interlude between her recommending and me accepting that, and in the meantime having this friend come and my GP pointed out, and so it's kind of like it obviously got to that point where everyone around me was starting to see this. Well, the people that I was seeing in that context were starting to see this. I mean, looking back on it, Ro, my husband, says, you have been bad, but I thought we were just tired, and so I was like less able to put up with you as well because I'm also tired, and so we thought it was this combined thing. But again, the excuse of it, I mean, the thing is, like, how candid do you want me to be about what I was thinking and feeling? Like,
it's up to you,
it's like I'm comfy to talk about anything. I mean, the thing is, it's amazing looking back what thoughts I was able to justify as normal. So I mean, what I was feeling to start with was things like kind of, it was more anger and frustration than your classic depression symptoms. Like I wasn't sad, I wasn't lonely, I wasn't your stereotypical picture of depressed. I was angry and I was frustrated and I was irrational. I would swing from, I'd become angry fast at illogical things, at normal parenting things, like the baby was difficult to go to bed, or you'd rock her to sleep and then you'd settle her down and she'd wake up again, like classic. But it would make me so angry. And she's starting solid, she doesn't want to eat it, she chucks it on the floor, she doesn't want to eat that, doesn't want to eat this. I'd get angry about that, which is irrational. And then I described it to my doctor like a switch of apathy. Like I'd go from being angry, like I'd be looking at this little baby going, I'm so angry at your behaviour, and then suddenly it would click and I couldn't care. Like, fine, just cry there then, like whatever. If that's what you're doing, you just do that. And I'd feel nothing about it. I'd look at her crying and I'd go, yep. And I mean, my friends know that I'm quite the gentle parent. Like I was just telling B before that I've just fed her to sleep, and she's now 15 months old, we're still breastfeeding to sleep, that sort of thing. Like I'm very much a gentle parent, and this was something that was becoming normal, was to be angry at her for normal baby behaviour, and then suddenly switch into apathy. So my GP said this is disassociation, which is a bad thing, and I said, oh yeah, that's the word that works better. It's disassociation, and that's sort of how it started. But then it became more than that. It became, how little baby fingers with their little velociraptor fingernails would claw at you while you breastfeed and it hurts. I would let her do that, and I would let her pinch me and scratch me and hurt me, because I thought I do things that make her upset, so she should be allowed to hurt me in return. And this is a baby of like 5 months old. And at the time I could sit there and think this, and I would go, Liv, that's sick, but I would do nothing about it. Like I wouldn't take her hand away, I would let it happen. And that, I think those thoughts were probably the first ones that I started going, this is a bit, don't know about this, but still did nothing, do nothing.
And it's hard, I'll just turn it, it's really hard to do something about something when you are so sleep deprived and exhausted, and your partner is too, and you don't know any different, and the stigma. So Liv mentioned something about, oh no, that's not me, I don't want to go to that, to a unit that we have close by that can help. And you know, I think COVID has been an amazing example of the stigma we have around sick days. You know, in terms of sickness, you know, people don't want to call in sick because they don't want their colleagues to think that they're letting them down, and then all of a sudden now it's okay to be at home and be sick. And I think it's really brought up a lot of stigma that exists around things, and it's, you know, a friend of mine was telling me once that the first thoughts we have, that judgment that often comes into our heads, is how we're socially brought up. And then the second thoughts that you have about something are what you actually think. And, you know, if I'm really honest, when transgender people started having babies, my first reaction was a bit like, oh, really? A man's having a baby? Hang on, that's a woman's thing, that's woman's business. That's weird. And then I sat back and went, hang on, what do I really feel about this? And I was like, actually, this is what I feel about it. And actually, I'm okay with that, because if it's got nothing to do with me, and I'm going to support anyone that I provide care for, and I don't want anyone to ever feel excluded, and I want to include everyone who I possibly can. And what difference does it make if someone is having a baby with someone they love or on their own because they felt like it's right for them? And so it's that kind of process. And I think mental health around in general is still, we're getting a lot better at it, but there is still so much stigma, and no one wants it to be them, and no one wants to admit that it's them. So it's extremely brave that Liv has come here to share that, but that kind of stuff is what helps us break it down. And it's so easy to judge someone in regards to something until you've lived it yourself. Maternal suicide is currently our number one killer of women in childbirth, in those childbirth. It's a number one cause of maternal mortality, and that is not okay. It's not okay, and it really reflects poorly on our healthcare system, in terms of what we provide, but it also reflects poorly in terms of, and I don't mean that in terms of the services. We've got amazing services. In my country, in Australia, we have incredible services that can be accessed, but I think there is so much left to do in terms of how many appointments we give postnatally, in terms of what appointments we give. You know, it should really be mandatory that, or not mandatory, but mandatory sounds horrible, should be part of the public health system, that every person who's given birth gets to see a women's health physio, that everyone gets to see a mental health nurse or a psychologist. You know, that should be built into it. Yeah, it should be routine care. Thank you. Sometimes I don't get my words right live. Don't pin me down for it later. It should be part of routine care, and there's things that, and they just aren't. And when we look at our statistics around postnatal depression, postnatal anxiety, and antenatal depression and antenatal anxiety, and maternal suicide, we really have to start acting, and domestic violence too, which I'm going to touch on later. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And I think a really important thing that she mentioned was anger. Anger is a go-to emotion for me, and it's definitely something that I experienced a lot post-birth. And I think you know, postnatal depression is often seen as, or viewed as, something like, oh, you know, you can't get out of bed, you can't carry on with your day, but it presents itself in so many different ways. If you don't feel like you anymore, which we're going to talk about, there are parts of that that are normal post-birth, but if there are irrational thoughts in your head, and, you know, people do harm babies, and I certainly understood why post-birth myself, and I will bring this up with every couple I care for in the postnatal period. And when you've just had a baby, you look at me like I'm the worst person in the world when I say it, and I don't care, because I know that there is going to be a point that you come to post-birth where you remember what I've said, and you'll know, oh, that's what she was talking about. And I've had a couple of people come back to me over the years and say that, and you will get to a point where you may want to hurt your baby, whether you think it a lot or you think it just once. It will cross your mind at some point. And I always say that your baby is really safe if it's on a flat surface like a cot, and it's protected and it can't roll off or roll off onto the ground. You are much better to put your baby down and let it scream and walk away and ring someone. That's the key. Walk outside and scream. Walk outside and say, I need help, or ring someone. And get them to come over and get them to help, and that is okay. You will feel like shit afterwards. Most people, some people won't. As Olivia said, she had that apathy. But just know that it does cross people's minds, and it's really common for it to happen during the nighttime when you can't see your baby. And a thing of advice that I often give is to turn a light on. Or even use your phone, because babies are made with big, big eyes and big heads to look cute, so that we want to care for them. And they don't look cute in the dark because you can't see them. And a really, really good technique is to actually turn the light on when you've got that anger in the night and look at your baby, try and calm down. But if it's gone past that, if you're not rational anymore, you've gone into that irrational stage, you really, really need help. And that help can enable that anger and that apathy or that depression or that anxiety or whatever it is, however it presents to you, to go away, decrease, go away, and actually enjoy motherhood. So where are you at now, Liv?
Worlds away. Worlds away from that. It was a couple of weeks on the sertraline before I felt like this big cloud had lifted, and it was freeing. Yeah, it was all the classic cliches about it. It was
getting out of the hole.
It was myself. I was back again, and certainly John, when I saw him at a follow-up appointment, because he saw me regularly after that, every couple of weeks, he said to me, as I was leaving his office, "Welcome back, Liv." And I said, it really does feel like that, John. Like it does. And certainly, the friends that had been the ones to spot it saw it as well. They said, she'd call me on the phone, "Oh, you sound like you again," that sort of thing. And now I'm great. Like I'm still on the sertraline. Like I've said, I would much rather take it for the rest of my life than ever feel like that again. Yeah.
Is there a plan to try and decrease that or anything like that?
Yeah, we've dropped back to a half dose, and we'll continue with that for a long time. Really, it's something that you pull back on slowly rather than fast and hard. So, and I mean, I know now what to look for, and I think that's the hardest thing. I mean, next time around, obviously there's a risk of getting it again, because this can happen again. But at least I know, like John said, happy to let you go on your own. But as soon as you start feeling like this again, you let me know and we'll get you back on it. And I went, yep, 100% agreement from me. Yeah. I'm not going back where I was. Yeah. Because can I go back a little smidge? I wanted to talk about your the suicide thing among. Just as another example of how you're able to justify these things, like deeply abnormal thoughts. So without freaking anybody or my friends that might be watching this, I'm sorry if you're learning this for the first time by watching this, but I had a plan to commit suicide, but it was not an ideation, it wasn't a desire, it wasn't something that I felt like I wanted or needed to do. It felt like a backup plan. It was something I thought about because I, just in case I needed to do
like
this.
An escape.
Yeah, but it wasn't like an escape like a holiday. It wasn't an escape that I craved. It was if I need to do this, then I know how I'll do it. Yeah. And it was a logical, thought out thing. Like I knew what time of the day, I knew how, I knew what time of the day, I knew where, I had little communications that I was going to put, I knew who I'd call so that Charlotte wouldn't be alone in the house for too long. Like I had it planned, but it wasn't even until after I'd been on the sertraline for a couple of weeks that I even recognised it as a plan to kill myself. Yeah. At the time it was so normal for me to be thinking about that, and I thought about it quite a lot, that it was, I didn't see the problem with that. So like when I first saw Gillian, the health therapist.
Yeah.
When she asked me, have you ever thought about hurting it? So I said no, because I genuinely didn't think I had. It wasn't something that I wanted to do as such. It was something I'd thought about in the background.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess one of my pieces of advice is, if you have any thoughts of that's not normal, and it sounds so hilarious to say that now, like, obviously it's not normal.
Yeah.
But it was fine to me at the time. Yeah.
And I think so many people that are experiencing different things like domestic violence, mental illness, things like that, the abnormal can seem very normal and very real, which is why it's so hard for people to come out of that. And I was going to touch on that with the domestic violence stuff, so I'm really glad that you raised it. Is there anything else, like we've covered Panda and Beyond Blue? We can't see the comments again tonight, so I'm going to get Liv, have you got your phone with you?
Yeah.
To maybe get on, because people may have made some comments, but suicide thoughts are not normal. You need to seek help. You need to access appropriate healthcare, and so please, if you are feeling those right now, you come to a stage where you are feeling those, please tell somebody, please tell your GP, please tell your partner, somebody you trust, somebody that cares for you. Ring Beyond Blue, ring Lifeline, ring Panda. Do something, because your life is worth living and your child wants you as their mother or their father. And in terms of COVID, no one's life is worth more than their life insurance. So if you are financially struggling at the moment, please remember that your children want you around more than something paid off, or there's always a way to get food on the table, and heat in your house. These are really serious things that we're talking about tonight, and I'm sorry if they're triggering anything for anyone. I'm trying my hardest not to cry.
You're doing a great job.
So emotional. You guys know I'm a crier already, and then the hormones, I meant to say that at the start. Total disclaimer about crying tonight. But please seek help. There are so many options. You can Google, I want to kill myself, how can I get help? And all the lifelines and that will come up. Or I'm in a domestic violence relationship, I need help. I'm having financial issues in Australia and I need help, or whatever country you're in. If you're in a high income country, we have amazing health services that can help you. So Liv's just going through the comments. Hopefully you've heard us. Hey?
Hi, Erin.
People are saying hi. Liv's just realised that all her friends have watched this now. So extra kudos to you, girlfriend. Thank you so much for being the brave soul that you are, because this may be the difference between somebody getting help or not, or someone committing suicide or not, by just watching this, or somebody being the friend that reaches out and says something. Please be the friend that says, I don't think you're well and I think you need help, and I'm going to help you to do that.
It's a scary thing to say to someone, but honestly, being told that I wasn't well was more important than somebody asking me if I was okay.
Yeah, because are you okay? You can.
It's easy to go, oh yeah, I'm tired.
Yeah.
It's easy answer, it's done. And then everybody goes, oh yeah, it's tiring. And that's the end of that conversation. But having
motherhood's hard.
Yeah, it is. And then but having someone say, Liv, you're not okay, was me going,
shit, this is real. These thoughts that I'm feeling are real. All right.
Michaela's asked, she says, on antidepressants before she fell pregnant, am I at high risk of postnatal depression? The answer to that is yes. Should I discuss it with the people? Yes, you should.
Yeah, so if there are different factors that increase your risk of postnatal depression, I feel like, antenatal depression and depression in the past are two of those risk factors. If you'd like more information on postnatal depression, please head to Beyond Blue or Panda, P-A-N-D-A, and read up about it. And if you're worried about it, please speak to your care provider now and put in some systems in place. Start talking to a psychologist now, or a mental health nurse now. And
any history or no history.
Any history. If you don't have a history, if it's something you're worried about, there is, seeing a psychologist is can be a really healthy thing to do. It's really nice to be listened to. We had to see a psychologist for when we became foster parents, and we loved it. We were like, someone listened to us for a whole hour. Let's do this again. And then we did it as a couple prophylactically to prevent kind of issues post-birth. That was something we both decided was a really good thing to do. As a couple with a new child, to help our relationship, because the divorce rates are huge, and that's something that neither of us wanted to do. So that's definitely something that you can do as well. And often people will see you individually and as a couple, which is really beautiful to have an hour out of your week where you get heard and actually heard, not just yeah. Okay, I'm gonna move on. Liv, love you dearly. Are you okay to leave?
Yeah.
You good?
I'm good. Honestly, this is much easier than going through it.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff now.
If it doesn't feel like you, then you're detached on it. But let me know. Please send me a message that you get home okay. And thank you so much. Please send some love for Liv helping, just coming over tonight and giving up her time to share an extremely raw and real experience with you all. Thanks, babe. You're an absolute rock star.
I'll go home and wait till it is able to be rewatched.
And then watch yourself and go. Okay, so I wanted to share some of my stories now around incontinence and prolapse and fecal incontinence and all that jazz. Yeah, don't forget your bag and your keys. You'll need those. So some of you know this already if you know me, or you've watched some of my Instagram stuff, so I'm going to go over it quickly, but this is going to lead me into a discussion around post-birth bodies. So I suffered from incontinence, which is wetting myself when I sneezed from the age of 19. I had a severe history of constipation as a child and chronic hay fever. So I started off with just a couple of, little wet spots every, now and then when I was 19, and that progressively got worse. And I'm going to make this story really quick, but basically by the time I was 29, 30 and wanting to have my first baby, I would wet myself with sneezing, and I knew that having a baby, just the pregnancy alone was going to make that bad, make it worse. And so I went and saw a women's health physio, got told to do my Kegels, stop running, don't have a baby for 4 months, and she'll be right. Well, I wasn't right. By 6 weeks pregnancy, I was vomiting. 6 weeks of pregnancy, with my first pregnancy, I was vomiting 3 to 4 times a day. It got to the point where I couldn't roll over in bed without that motion causing me to vomit. It was horrendous. By 8 weeks, I was wearing incontinence pads, and if you have never seen them before, it's pretty much like wearing a long surfboard between your knickers. It affects what you wear because they're so big and bulky. And basically I was doing a lot of home birth at the time and appointments in women's houses, and it's really hard to get rid of an incontinence pad in someone's house because they stink and they're huge. By 18 weeks of my pregnancy, I wanted a termination. I never would have gone through with it ever, but it's where my head was at. I was done. It was fucked. Pregnancy was meant to be this time where we were painting each other's noses whilst painting the nursery and giggling and laughing, and everyone was so excited for us, and I felt so bloody guilty about not being excited and not wanting to be pregnant anymore. I wanted the baby, I just didn't want to be pregnant. It was traumatic, and I couldn't tell that story without crying for a long time. Mr. Corin Floor would come home and I'd be at the kitchen bench and I'd vomit and wet myself, and he'd be like, oh, I'll just go and get a mop. Like, far out. He was so supportive. But you want to be this sexy pregnant woman, and here you are covered in urine and vomit. And that was my reality. I was covered in urine and vomit for a lot of my pregnancy. So much so that and if I'm honest, the sleep deprivation postnatal made me not want to have another child. Banjo will be 4 by the time this baby is born, which is a pretty big gap for most people in Australia. Normally it's about 2 years. And that's why I just couldn't face going back. And so I was really scared about birth. I know, right? this person who talks about birth being the most amazing experience, well, I couldn't sneeze without wetting myself. So how the hell was I going to have a baby was what I came down to. And I never told anyone that because I didn't want it to ruin my reputation of being a birth lover and believer. But I seriously doubted my body, and I was about to have a home birth. And so I needed to birth well. I had an epic birth, as you all know. I birthed him absolutely brilliantly. And from that birth, I got the confidence and belief in my body. I was like, if I can do that, if I can grow a baby and give birth, then I can heal. And you'll hear me say that a lot on Instagram. But that's the reality. I was like, I could do all that. My body could do all that. So I can heal. And so I went into research. I'm an academic. I love research. And so I started researching and looking at what people were doing in this space of post-birth bodies. So I'm not about to give you these statistics to scare you. I'm giving you these statistics so that you are informed. So that if you think this is happening to you, you realize that A, you can heal, that you can do something about it. I was going to say B, that you can do something about it, but I guess it's the same thing. So 1 in 3 women post-birth experience incontinence. It's incontinence, so leaking urine. It's not just women post-birth. I think it's something like 28% of elite athletes prior to having children are incontinent. All right, so this is not just a pregnancy and birth thing, but it definitely is associated with birth, and factors like length of pushing, so how long you push for, forceps and episiotomy will increase your risk of having these pelvic floor dysfunctions. 1 in 5 women experience fecal incontinence at 1 year post-birth. That is massive. 1 in 5. I don't know anyone that experiences this, which means that either the statistics are wrong or we aren't talking about it. And I'm going to go with we aren't talking about it because that's huge. And who wants to admit that they're leaking poo? I mean, I can admit that I'm leaking urine. I've never leaked poo, but I don't know if I'd want to share that. That's pretty full on. And like, you know, what we talked about with Liv, you catch up with someone at a cafe post-birth, your friends, your mum's group. How are you? Oh, actually, poo's coming out, like just uncontrollably. When I fart, I poo myself. That's not the conversation that's going to go down. Neither is, oh, actually, I think having suicidal thoughts, or I'm leaking urine, or I feel like my vagina's hanging out. And so it's really bloody hard to talk about these things and get help a lot of the time. But just know that your care providers are used to these kind of experiences, and we are the best people to provide you with care and referral to other people that can provide you with good care in those circumstances too. And something I want to touch on with postnatal depression too, as Liv said, it hit her a little bit later, around that 4 to 5 month mark. For some women, they don't experience it until their baby's 1 or 18 months. It's not something that just is a continuation of baby blues. It is something that can be experienced much later, and just because you don't have it at the start doesn't mean you're not at risk of developing it later. So it's just something to keep in your mind. The other thing is these things that I'm talking about now, like urinary incontinence, prolapse, diastasis recti, and fecal incontinence. Sometimes, so with prolapse and diastasis recti, they can be asymptomatic at first, meaning you don't experience any symptoms until some people don't experience them at all after the first birth of their baby, but then they get them during their second pregnancy. And prolapse is the biggest one. So up to 50% of women post-birth, so in that first year post-birth, will experience a form of prolapse. And then up to 75% of women in their lifetime experience it. So prolapse is where, I've done a video on this to have a look at it because I used some props, but basically the pelvic floor has dropped down and either the bladder comes into that front part of the vaginal wall, or the uterus starts to bulge down, or the rectum comes in. There's 3 different types of prolapse. And so that is huge, up to 75%. That's 3 out of 4 women. But again, we don't talk about it. And for a lot of people, they don't experience the symptoms until years later, or, you know, a year or 2 years later, or pregnancies, after a couple of pregnancies have occurred. And so it's important to know about the symptoms, and also the risk factors, so that if you think you have an issue, you can get onto it really early. So Core and Floor Restore, which is my program, came about because of my own incontinence. I developed it for myself. I didn't develop it for anyone else at the time. And then I went back to the gym, and I wanted to be, you know, group fitness was a huge part of me pre-baby, pre-mum me, and I wanted to get back into it. And so I headed back to the gym and had this really lovely gym instructor who knew I was post-birth, but telling me to do star jumps. And I wanted to keep up with everyone in the class. I wanted to keep up with the pre-mum me, and but I knew that if I did them, I would leak. And you know, it's in a group fitness class, they don't say, if you leak urine, do star jumps this way. Well, in my fitness classes I do, but in most fitness classes they don't. And it's not something, you know, post-birth is not really covered a lot in general group fitness and personal training. It's something that people specialise in. And so I started going, hang on a second, I need to address this. And so I became a personal trainer during my mat leave. Just for something to do whilst I had a newborn. And then I started training women in my area, and I realised it was really hard in group fitness to teach correct pelvic floor and core activation. And I was sitting on a client's floor in their lounge room, watching her and her sister laugh and cry about their postnatal bodies and how much they didn't know about them, and how much they didn't realise what was going on, and how much they didn't realise that what they were doing every day was actually making the situation worse. And I was like, this knowledge that I have, I now need to share. And so I developed Core and Floor Restore, and it I ran it in my hometown, and it was a huge success, and everyone loved it. And so I had a few people say to me, this needs to go online, every woman needs to know this. And so that's how Core and Floor was born. And my biggest thing is that if you're experiencing something, you can heal. 20% of gynae wait lists for prolapse surgery. About 67%, I think it is, in the first 2 years of prolapse surgery, people need further repair. And those kind of stats that I was looking at was what kind of got me thinking, hang on a second, we're not doing this right. Because Kegels aren't enough. Doing your 10 Kegels for 10 seconds a day isn't enough if you are moving and exercising and breathing against your pelvic floor for the remainder of the time you're awake. And that's often what happens. And so that's why Core and Floor has a lot of theory, so that you understand your body, you understand how it's moving and how it needs to move and how it needs to exercise, because the majority of us put pressure on that pelvic floor all day long when we exercise and move and cough and sneeze rather than protecting it. All right, so that is a quick thing on incontinence and prolapse. What often happens is people are asymptomatic, especially with diastasis recti and things like that, or they don't know about it. They don't know about diastasis recti, which is the injury to the connective tissue between the six-pack, and where you get your stomach muscles are separated. So 100% of women who reach 37 weeks gestation have abdominal separation. And then if there's injury to that tissue is not strong, and so you get this gap. And a lot of people talk about the width of the gap, but it's actually the depth, because that tells us about the integrity of the connective tissue. And so often what I see is people in their third pregnancy feeling very broken. First pregnancy, everything's so lovely, look at my body, it's changing. And then second pregnancy, everything starts to show a lot earlier, hurt a lot more, hurt a lot earlier. Hang on a second, this is not what I felt like in my first pregnancy. And then by third pregnancy, people are like, I feel broken. I feel like I've got no core, no pelvic floor, everything hurts, my back hurts, my pelvis hurts, my hips hurt. And a lot of it stems down to this core and pelvic floor dysfunction, which is why my pregnancy course came about, because I was like, hang on, Why are we waiting to post-birth to fix these issues? Let's try and target them in pregnancy and decrease the risk of them happening in the first place. And obviously I haven't got research on my program yet, but that's the aim of it. Okay, it's not just vaginal birth too that increases the risk. Pregnancy, it puts a lot of weight on the pelvic floor. So people think, oh, I've had a cesarean, I'm fine. You're not. Your pelvic floor and core has carried a baby. Your heart has to shift out of the way to make room for your growing baby. There is a lot of physical change going on there. And so you have to heal. Same if you've had a miscarriage or a termination or a fetal death, fetal loss at any gestation. Our care post-miscarriage is worse than our care post-birth. And we don't follow women up and we don't offer them services. You have still grown a baby. You've had a huge hormone, emotional, and physiological changes in your body, and you actually need to heal from those. Physically and psychologically. So doing things to repair your core and pelvic floor, doing things to rebuild your strength and any depletions that you may have in terms of things like iron, and then psychologically dealing with your grief and loss. Okay, so I will quickly touch on cesarean wound massage. It's something that's often not talked about by doctors or supported very well, but it's a lot of physios and osteopaths, highly recommend it. I've done a video on it. It's on, I think it's in the blog. Yeah, it's in my blog, so it's free on my website. It's a 17-minute video on why you should massage your scar, when you should do it, how you should do it. So head there for that. Your body post-birth is, for me, it's so funny. I'd spent so long looking at women's bodies post-birth as a midwife, and they were so beautiful to me because all I saw was the strength in how they'd given birth. And that goes for any type of birth, however that baby was born. I'd look at a cesarean scar and think, wow, that's amazing that your baby was able to come out of that space in your body. And I'd look at a belly with the linea nigra, so that black line. I love that black line, but a lot of people hate it. And so looking at that going, wow, that's a beautiful sign of pregnancy, and it's a part of you that's going to cease as you move out of the fourth trimester. But I remember looking down at my own body, and I mentioned this briefly before, and just going, what the fuck? Like, whose vagina is that? They're not my boobs. God, I loved my boobs when my milk came in, and my biggest advice is to take as many photos as you can when your milk comes in, because your boobs are never going to be that epic again until you are pregnant, until you have another baby, because after that, they're pretty good during breastfeeding, but after that, well, mine especially turned into empty tea bags that I would just, roll up and tuck into a bra. It's not that bad, but that's how it felt. Your squishy belly. I remember just looking at my body and thinking, I wasn't prepared for this. I didn't expect this. And I broke my hand really bad. I had a mountain biking accident a few years ago, and I broke my hand, and it was in a cast for about 4 months. I had to have a couple of surgeries. It was pretty bad. And they'd taken the cast off just prior to my third surgery. And I remember looking at both of my hands, and the hand that had the cast was extremely white and hairy. They get so hairy in a cast, and thin. It looked like this 9-year-old person's arm. And I remember I started to cry, and this anaesthetist came up to me, and he was like, it's okay, it will get better, it will get stronger, it will heal. And when I was thinking about this session today, that story came into my head, because it's so true about your post-birth body. Those first initial days, it can look so different, and it's not what you're used to, and then it changes, and it will get stronger, and it will heal, and you will hopefully love your body and love the skin you're in. And I now only have respect for my body and its ability of what it has done and what it can do and what it does for me every day. But it is a really big thing in terms of natal wellness, to love your body. Okay, so lots of things here. I feel like I need to talk for a few days on this. Let's go into postnatal doulas. Lots of people don't know about postnatal doulas. Everyone needs one, basically. A postnatal doula is an exceptional help, and they all run differently. So you have to see who's available in your area and what they can provide help with, but they are basically our community. A thing that I love to do for women when they're pregnant is something called a blessing way. So a blessing way is in replacement, or sometimes done in conjunction with, a baby shower. So a baby shower is typically, the focus is around the baby, or the games around the baby, presents are for the baby. A blessing way is around the woman or the mother or the birthing person, and it's basically saying, we are here for you, we are your support, we think you're really strong, and it's about building that person up prior to birth and setting things up in the postnatal period to support them. So a blessing way is a traditional Native American tradition, so I don't want to take away from that at all. Please research them and look it up, but there are modern blessing ways now that Western culture has taken on, and there's lots of different ways that they can be done. They can be religious, they can not be, they can be really cultural, they can not be. But a big thing that I like to do in the blessing ways that I host for my friends are creating a meal roster. And I always say to people, you don't need baby clothes. People, you can get them for free, you can get them given to you. But having cooked meals in the freezer, or having a friend that comes over, drops a meal at your door, knocks and leaves, so they don't even come in, they don't get the baby cuddles. Or if they do come in, they come in and do vacuuming, or they come in and put your washing away, but they're not there to talk to you, or they come and hold your baby while you sleep. So if you've got great friends and great support network, that is something that you can ask for rather than gifts that you don't need or that you won't use. Otherwise, a postpartum doula, or paying for a postpartum doula for your friends, is a really great idea, and they often do the same. So everyone does different things, but every doula does different things, so you have to talk to them, but often it's coming in, they might baby wear your baby so it feels really supported and comfortable while you have a nap, and at the same time put your washing away, or they may bring food around. Some of them do exercise with you. Everyone's got different services, so look them up. I really think, I wish that women would, or families would, get 6 weeks of postpartum doula support to use in that first year post-life. I think that would significantly improve our mental health rates, especially. We fuck up postnatal. We're not meant to do it in our homes, in our 4-bedroom homes, alone by ourselves. When I was in the Solomon Islands, I didn't know which baby belonged to which family, and that's because everyone just got in and did it together. The Birth Mat book goes a lot into post-birth and gets you to ask questions and sit down with your partner too. So if you've got that, head to that section and have a look at it. But motherhood or parenthood can be very lonely and isolating, and we don't have our mums and our cousins and our aunties and our sisters around anymore. And obviously during COVID, that's been, made even worse. And mums groups can be an amazing support, but they can also be really challenging. We don't have any other time in our lives where we get together with a bunch of strangers and compare notes. And as much as we try and encourage comparisons not to happen, human beings do it really normally, really naturally. It's a natural thing that we do. So, when you get a new boyfriend or a partner, you don't get together with a whole group of people that have got a new partner or a new boyfriend or girlfriend, and sit together and talk about your experiences. And I reckon if we did, none of us would end up in a relationship at the end of it, because the grass is always greener. So just be mindful with mothers groups and comparisons, especially around things like children's development. I remember my son didn't roll, and I was getting really worried about it until Mr. Corenflaw said to me one day, what healthy adult do you know that doesn't roll over? And my son was healthy. Everything about him was healthy. And I was like, all right, you're right. And it was then that I was like, you got to stop comparing. So just engage in things that are good for you mentally and physically is what I'm trying to get out there. And really try and be aware of what is helping you and what isn't, which can be really hard at the time. Sleep. Sleep. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture. It is used it's been used in, prisoner of war camps. It's been used in war throughout history to torture people. It is torture. And unfortunately, we don't really have a good grasp of how children sleep in our Western world. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about it. I'm not an expert on this. My son has, he woke 45-minutely from 7 to 11 months. And I went crazy over it, to be honest. I can remember one time Mr. Cornfloor came in while I was in bed with my son, and I felt like the Exodus. I felt like my head was spinning, and I can't remember what I said, but I know I said it in a voice that I didn't even know existed within me. And he took Banjo and the two of them went outside. And I just remember knowing at the time that I was going absolutely crazy. I didn't have postnatal depression, but sleep deprivation near killed me, if I'm really honest. And I wasn't prepared for it. So I had fostered children for many years. I was a midwife, and I had no idea about that 4 to 6 month sleep progression or regression, or whichever way you choose to look at it. So I highly recommend being prepared for it and reading up about it. There's a beautiful book called The No Cry Sleep Solution that I love as a parent, recommending that. Everyone's going to do different things, and what I really want to say about this is, as I've said with everything, what works for you may not work for the next person, and you need to find what works for your perfect little trio. So your family is a unique unit, and it needs to work for you and feel good. The only things I regret about parenting are not listening to my instinct, and I've talked about that a lot through these episodes. But I spent a lot of months trying to do things, especially around sleep, that mattered to people in my life that mattered to me. So people who I care about, I tried to do it their way. I don't know whether I was trying to please them or I trusted them, but it didn't feel right at the time. And what ended up working for me was co-sleeping and breastfeeding to sleep. And so I do want to talk about co-sleeping just quickly. The Australian College of Midwives has a beautiful position statement on co-sleeping, and they recognise that that it is a really common thing across many countries and cultures, and they're common and they're valued in infant practices in both developed and developing countries across the world. So I'm going to read out some of this because I don't want to get it wrong, and I think it's really important. So bed sharing and co-sleeping are associated with many benefits. However, the risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy, including SIDS and fatal sleeping accidents, is increased in certain circumstances. Bed sharing and breastfeeding are integrated infant care practices. Breastfeeding promotes bed sharing, while bed sharing promotes breastfeeding. And this is the thing that's really important, is many parents will fall asleep with their baby whether they intend to or not. And a lot of them will wake up going, oh, I did that and I wasn't expecting it, or I didn't want to do that. And so it's about having risk minimization practices in place in your bed to decrease the risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy. So the Australian College of Midwives really promotes that all parents should be provided with clear and impartial information about the benefits and contraindications to sharing a sleep surface using risk minimization guidelines in order to make informed decisions. And it's something that so many people want to do or do in secret because they're scared that their health care provider is going to tell them not to do it. So I wanted to run through some information here. Sorry for reading it, but I just want to make sure I get it right. So co-sleeping and bed sharing between mothers and their babies is an established and valued practice in most cultures and considered the social norm for approximately 90% of the world's population. Sharing a sleep surface with a baby is a common infant practice in Australia, with rates between 51 to 80% depending on infant age at the time of measurement. Bed sharing and co-sleeping with a baby has been associated with many benefits, which include enhanced maternal-infant bonding and maternal responsiveness, improved settling with reduced crying, improved maternal and infant sleep, and increased arousals, increased duration of breastfeeding, and reduced formula supplementation. Longitudinal studies, so really long studies that look at things over a long period of time, have suggested that those who shared the parental bed as babies and children become adults with higher self-esteem and better social skills and emotional outcomes. That kind of evidence is what really made me go, hang on, B, I really want to co-sleep and I'm going to go with this. And there were many nights where I longed and fantasized for my own bed. I just wanted 4 hours solid sleep without anyone touching me or being in my bed. And I used to fantasize about running away to it could have been the dirtiest motel ever with bed bugs. I wouldn't have cared. I just wanted a bed to my own. And now my son sleeps in his own bed, and no amount of expensive lavender oil or dolls with a heartbeat or special blankets or cuddly toys or fancy sheets or anything else that you buy at 2 a.m. when you're so sleep deprived and so desperate for sleep. You'll buy it all, and they're so overpriced and so expensive. Anything to do with sleep is ridiculously priced, and I can't stand it because you are so vulnerable and desperate at the time that you're willing to pay anything, and the majority of it isn't evidence-based and doesn't work, but you'll buy it anyway, and you'll probably swear by it if it works for the first night. But it was those benefits that made me want to co-sleep, and that a lot of the times I enjoyed it for most of it, but there were definitely times where I was like, oh, I have to go to bed again, and he's in the bed, and and then now he sleeps in his own bed, and we have a queen bed in his room so that if he does wake during the night, which he does most nights, he'll still wake once and call out for us. We just go in with him. One of us goes in with him. And the best part is that now my partner, Mr. Cornfloor can go in. It's not, Benj relied on me for the first 2 years of his life, but now he wants his daddy to sleep with him. But the other night I was like, I'm just going to go and sleep with him. And I just, when I went to bed, I got him to his bed and I cuddled him, and I was like, oh, I miss this. I miss laying with you. I miss cuddling you. And he stirred as I came into the bed and he said, lay with me, mummy. And it's just heaven. And there's 2 sayings that really enabled me to survive those first couple of years. And the first one was, this too shall pass. And the second one was reminding myself that he's not going to want this forever. He's not going to let me climb into his bed and sleep with him when he's older. And there will come a point where I miss this. And I want him to want to share a bed with me, and he won't anymore. Or I want him to ask me to read him another story. Or I want him to ask me to play robots with him or dinosaurs, because all of that will go, because I don't want to share a bed with my mum, and I don't want to play dinosaurs with my mum anymore. Those 2 sayings really helped me to put things into practice when I was well. They're not going to help in all situations, obviously, and that's where external support comes in. So just going back to the position statement, so bed sharing and co-sleeping have been associated with an increased risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy, including sudden infant death syndrome, so what we know as SIDS, and fatal sleeping accidents in certain circumstances. The risk associated with shared sleep surfaces is significantly increased in the presence of other known risk factors for sudden infant death. So this is where it's important, including antenatal and postnatal exposure to tobacco smoking, prone sleep position, so laying in a prone position, parental drug, prescribed or illicit, and alcohol consumption, soft sleep surfaces, multiple bed sharers, maternal sedation, and obesity. So as a midwife, we are expected to advise you that if you smoke, drink alcohol, or take drugs or medication, that your baby will have a lower risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy if the baby sleeps on a separate surface such as a cot next to your bed. And it is recommended that your baby sleeps in your room with you for the first 6 months post-birth. So all that money you spent on your nursery was not worth it, because they're not going to sleep in there anyway. The 2 questions I got during my first pregnancy was, do you know what you're having, a boy or a girl? And have you got the nursery ready? My son's 3 and he's never had a nursery. You don't waste your money on stuff like that, and don't waste your money on stuff for baby. Spend it on looking after you post-birth and your relationship. That's much more important. So sleeping on a sofa or a couch with a baby significantly increases the risk and should be avoided. Babies most at risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy are those born preterm, of low birth weight, and babies less than 11 weeks of age. So a lot of people, and for me, you know, he was in the bassinet until he was 3 or 4 months old. We didn't start co-sleeping until he was probably about 7 months. So co-sleeping in those first 11 weeks does really significantly increase, and so a lot of people have the bassinet next to the bed. In the absence of hazards, the risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy is not increased when parents bed share with their baby. So the hazards are smokers, have taken sedating drugs or medications, consumed alcohol prior to sleep, or sofa sharing. There is evidence to suggest that bed sharing in the absence of these hazards, so all the things we just talked about, may have a significant protective effect for infants older than 3 months. All right, so if all of you that are worried and have had conversations around co-sleeping, in the absence of hazards, there's actually really good evidence that it is protective and for mother and baby too. So they did these studies on co-sleeping, and they found that mothers actually make this little cocoon with their hand and their knee to protect the baby when they sleep. They filmed people co-sleeping. It's a really fascinating study. So room sharing, so when your baby's in the same room as you, is associated with a reduced risk of sudden unexpected death in infancy, and parents should be encouraged to keep their babies in their bedroom at night for the first 6 to 12 months of life in order to decrease that risk. So I know people buy fancy machines and all things like that, but there is actually really good evidence on things like room sharing that should be done. Rather than separating yourself from your baby in other rooms and putting those monitors on. Mothers who bottle feed their babies and babies who are bottle fed exhibit different behaviours during sleep. So the current evidence suggests that there is little benefit for a bottle fed baby to bed share, and that the safest place for bottle fed babies is to sleep on a separate surface next to the parent bed. So it's just something really, different evidence for bottle versus breastfeeding. And breastfeeding is protective against SUDI, so it is desirable to encourage and support exclusive bed sharing. Breastfeeding and bed sharing is an infant practice that's significantly associated with breastfeeding longevity. So people who bed share have longer breastfeeding times. They breastfeed for a lot longer. Breastfeeding and sharing a sleep surface constitute an integrated care system which is mutually reinforcing. So breastfeeding promotes shared sleeping, which increases breastfeeding frequency and extends duration of breastfeeding in the months. All right. I know I read that out, but I wanted to get that kind of stuff really supportive. So that is some stuff on sleep. With anything that we're talking about tonight, and with any kind of things in terms of feeding your baby in the first 6 months, feeding your baby food, sleeping, what my biggest recommendation is connect yourself with other people that think the same as you and share the same beliefs and values. So read books that go with what your instincts and how you want to parent are. So for me, I read the No Cry Sleep Solution book because I didn't want to do sleep training and I didn't want to do controlled crying. I connected with a Facebook group called Beyond Sleep Training Facebook group, and I owe a lot of my mental sanity to that group. I didn't interact with it much. I just read a lot of posts, and it gave me so much hope and reassurance, and was like this really postnatal supportive group for me, even though I hardly engaged in it. There's podcasts out there that are amazing that make you go, oh, I'm not the only one, and align with your train of thought. And the other thing is to read things. So there's great books around postnatal depletion. There's a book called Postnatal Depletion. I haven't read it yet. I've brought it and I couldn't find where I put it. It's probably on my bedside dresser with all the other books I brought that I've never read. But apparently it's written by a GP from up in Queensland. I don't think he's a GP, he's a doctor, sorry. Oscar somebody. All around postnatal depletion and what it is, and some really supportive tips on how to handle it. But different, your mum's group, just aligning yourself and getting information, and only really reading things that interest you and will help you can be really supportive, because there's a lot out there and you don't want to read too much and you don't want to be overwhelmed, which you will be in some ways without being able to help it. But oh God, it's so hard to give advice because it's such a unique and individual experience. I hope this is helping. But the main things you've got to learn about, the main things you need to know about and be prepared for are sleep, teething, leaps. So that Wonder Weeks book, I cannot highly recommend that enough. Once you understand that, it's really helpful. And matrescence. So matrescence is something that I mentioned briefly. It's covered in the Birth Max book. It's a relatively new concept to me and something that I really want to start reading more into. It's basically the process of becoming a mother. So it's looking at those physical, psychological, and emotional changes that occur after birth. It's like adolescence, okay, except for we really understand and respect adolescence, and we've all been through it by the time we look back on it, and it's a thing that we're prepped for, we're educated around as we're growing up, and we're supported through it. Matrescence is something that not a lot of people know about, they don't understand, and it's not really well supported. Much the same as adolescence, it's a huge hormonal shift, and much of it is driven by hormones. So this process of becoming a mother and all the physical, psychological, and emotional changes that you go through is actually a period of your life that anthropologists have actually studied for a really long time, but the medical world doesn't really mention or talk about much. And so it's this huge transition based on hormonal surges, and just like in adolescence, lots of different things can develop and occur along the way, and that's where care providers are needed. And so obviously postnatal depression is one of those things, as is so many other things in that period. So understanding what matrescence is and reading about that, and understanding what your body is going to go through and why, just like with childbirth. So many of us fear childbirth until we understand it and go, oh, that happens because of that, and that happens because of that. Okay, I'm comfortable with that because now I know about it. Matrescence is the same. If you understand those hormonal changes and what's going to happen, and your partner and your support people understand those, and they are much more able to support you, and you're able to support yourself better. We talk a lot about self-care in postnatal periods. Self-care. It's really hard to care for yourself when you don't feel like yourself. It's really hard to care for yourself when you are tired or lonely or feeling isolated or angry, or don't feel like you can do this anymore. And I want to say, just because we're talking about some pretty traumatic things and issues in this class, in this episode tonight, it doesn't mean that we don't love being a mother. It doesn't mean that we love our babies any less. It doesn't mean that we don't love motherhood. It just means that it's challenging. I love being a midwife, but there are parts of my job that are really challenging and that can cause me stress, and that can cause me to be upset, just like motherhood. But motherhood is 24/7 and you ain't ever getting rid of it. And parenthood too. Sorry, I'm focusing a lot on mothers tonight, but parenthood as well. And that probably brings me into my next thing around relationships. So there was some research a while back in New South Wales actually that showed 17% of couples break up within the first year post-birth. Someone said to me once, it was a friend's mother, don't break up with your partner until your youngest child is 6. And having had a child that now has all these teeth, that pretty much sleeps through the night, and that is pretty independent and toilet trained. By the way, I'm totally giving birth to a 3-year-old instead of a newborn this time round. So this baby is going to come out with all its teeth, sleeping through the night, and toilet trained. I wish. Those first years are so hard. Having now had a child that is like that, that newborn fog has lifted, and Mr. Corenfloor and I know you all wanted him to feature tonight. I know you all love him, and I tried, but he's exhausted, and he's also a pretty private person, and I'm able to share my stories on here, but he's pretty private, and he doesn't he's knackered and private, so he didn't want to be on here tonight. So I'm sorry to disappoint you all. There's a lot of people like, I've watched all this time just for him, and now he's not here. Sorry to disappoint. My live viewing's going to go out now. But our relationship prior to this pregnancy was the best it's ever been. In 10 years, it just kept getting better and better and better. But I fantasized about divorcing him probably on and off for those first 2 years post-birth. It is so hard to go through matrescence, and then to go through becoming new parents together, and everything that happens with it. I resented him. I resented him for everything. I resented him that he got to go to work and have a lunch break. And I remember the first time I went back to work and had lunch break, I was like, 30 minutes to eat? That's so superfluous. Like, what am I going to do with the other 28.3 minutes of my lunch break? Because I hadn't sat down to eat lunch in 10 months. I hadn't mostly weed without a baby being there, and so to have toilet breaks and lunch breaks was just so foreign. But I resented him. In my world, his life hadn't changed at all. He went to work and got to hang out with adults and got to do something he loved without having to think about us. He got to have lunch breaks, and he got to drive in the car without a crying baby, and nothing changed for him, in my opinion. But the reality was everything changed. Everything changed for him. I just didn't see it. That was, sorry, just moving chairs, but that was, that resentment, and that, that my son only wanted me and only wanted to be breastfed. It was huge. And then there's the sex part of it. I want you to know that it is totally normal to feel touched out. For me, I was having so much human connection. I was breastfeeding, so I was having someone on my boobs for, probably 4 to 5 hours a day, maybe longer. They say it's equivalent to a full-time job. I was co-sleeping with my son, so I was being touched all night long, and I didn't want to be touched at all. At all. I had no sexual desire whatsoever. And a big thing post-birth with sex is your vagina is really dry, especially if you're breastfeeding. Estrogen has a lot to do with that. And so if you are having sex post-birth, use a really good water-based lube. And you know, I compare sex to exercise a lot. You don't actually feel like doing it beforehand as a woman, typically. You don't feel like it, but you might drag your ass to class. And during it feels pretty good and you enjoy it. Some people are like, I don't enjoy exercise during it like I enjoy sex. But then afterwards you're like, oh, I need to do that more. I feel so good now. That's awesome. We should be doing that every day. And I think sex is exactly the same, you know, but it's really cruel how we are programmed, because men typically want it a lot more than women, and women typically only want it when they're ovulating as we get older, and we want it less and less. And then if you are not loving your body, or you are leaking urine, or you've got a prolapse, don't even think about it. Like, that body part is totally shut down. So here I was feeling feeling touched out, and totally resenting him for getting to live his normal life. That wasn't normal. He was coming home to a tired, cranky partner that, you know, didn't even want to really cuddle him, let alone anything else. But I was too self-absorbed and tired to notice that. And we had no issues in terms of no other stresses. We had, you know, we're not rich, but we had food on our table and our bills were paid. He has a good job that, you know, is secure. So there was no financial stress. Neither of us on drugs or abuse any kind of substance at all. So we don't have that. We have a supportive network around us, an amazing supportive network of family and friends. We had no other stresses. And I remember several times us going, how do people with stress do this? Because our life is pretty perfect and this is fucking hard. And, you know, that's really big. So if you do have other things, please seek help. And one of the things I want to talk about is domestic and family violence, because we lose way too many women to this every year. And I consider myself an extremely strong and assertive, often sometimes assertive, aggressive person. And if you know me, you'll know that my mother is just as strong. She's probably stronger. But her first husband was incarcerated for beating her way too many times, got away with it way too many times than he should have. He's now dead, so I can talk about him freely, but he was extremely physically abusive, and domestic violence is not just physical abuse. Financial abuse is a really big one. I'm going to talk about that next. It's not just physical, it can be emotional, it can be spiritual, it can be financial. It's basically preventing you from doing something that you need to do. If you are, the research says that people have to be asked 28 times before they'll disclose being in domestic violence relationships. And I look at my mum and I think, how? You are the strongest person I know. How did you live with that? And we know that domestic violence increases during pregnancy and post-birth, because the child is seen as a threat and a way out for people. And so there becomes this threat, and so the violence increases. And so there are lots of screening tools that we provide in our healthcare system to try and provide support. So if this is triggering anything for you and you are unsafe, there are so many things that you can do. And if you know someone that's unsafe, and I think that's more what I'm speaking to tonight, is recognising people in your support networks that may be someone that you've never met before in your mum's group that you become good friends with, notifying police and encouraging them to seek assistance through, there's lots of different domestic violence hotlines which I'll put up. But I look at my mum and think, how did that happen to you? And it's because in a lot of these situations, people they're abused so much and so slowly, and it builds up and builds up and builds up, and then people think that they deserve it, and so they think that they were deserving of the violence or whatever abuse took place. So this is a really hard thing to address, because I hope it doesn't put anyone at risk tonight. God, I hope it doesn't do that. But the reality is that it might. And if you are at risk at all, ever, please ring the police and please ring domestic violence hotlines. And if you are a neighbour and you hear something, report it. It doesn't matter. You know, there was a story recently from Western Australia where the police turned up to a guy's house because he was yelling out, "I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you." And he was talking to a spider that he was killing. So he was trying to kill a spider in his house, but his neighbours reported him thinking that he might have been killing his partner, and that's okay. It's all right that the police turned up, because it's much better to have that situation and have it sorted than not addressing it. So financial abuse is something that's really, really common, and probably a lot more common than we recognise, but it's not something that we often talk about. And sometimes it's something that we put on ourselves, and sometimes it's something that we experience in a relationship. But it's really popular post-birth when people are on maternity leave or not on maternity leave. And so commonly in the postnatal period, I'll talk to people who say, "Oh, well, I'm not earning money, so I can't spend it." I'm just going to be honest here, as a person to other people, your money needs to be combined. If you are having financial difficulties, Scott Paik, the Barefoot Investor, is an amazing person to read. But if you are in a relationship, that money is a team money, and if you can't partner by sharing money, then how are you meant to share any of your other experiences and partner through that and parent children? And just because you're at home not earning money, you are still working, and you are working extremely hard, and there shouldn't be guilt around that. I understand that it can be difficult financially in pregnancy and post-birth, and that things are given up because of that, and compromises are made, but you still need money to survive, and it shouldn't be a matter of, well, he or she is working and I'm not, so I can't spend it. I'm mainly raising it so you know it's an issue, and you can recognise it in friends and offer support if you need to. All right. Going back to work is a really big one. Back to your partner stuff too, there's an amazing book called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. So How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. It's an amazing book that it's funny, but it gives a lot of practical advice. It's written for heterosexual couples. She acknowledges that because that's where a lot of the research is in, but it's for any couple. It gives really, really practical advice on things like conflict resolution and problem solving and trying to sort out your household. So a lot of issues happen in relationships when the person who's been providing the main care, often the mother, goes back to work. And so what happens is when you're at home with a child, you spend a lot of time doing all the house things because you're at home every day. And then when you go back to work, because you've been doing it, you continue to do it. And so the load of caring for the house is not equal, and neither is the mental load. So there's a lot on this around mental load of mothers, and all they think of all day, every day compared to their partner. And so it's a really cool book. It's not meant to be a nasty thing about partners. The title's just there to grab your attention. But I found it really, really useful. All right. I feel like tonight has been all over the place. There's been so much to talk about. And I know it probably hasn't met all of your needs, and for some of you probably haven't enjoyed it, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry if you didn't enjoy it. I don't want to end on that. But just talking about going back to work just quickly, it's a really hard thing to be a career woman and a mum, and I struggled with it a lot because being a mother is a full-time job, and then you go back to having a full-time job, and that's where a lot of conflict and a lot of issues like postnatal depression can rise, and anxiety and relationship difficulties, because you're trying to be the best person at everything, and you realize when you go back to work that you're not that person that you were prior to having a baby at your job anymore, because you have this little human that's occupying your brain and your heart, which is absolutely divine but a real struggle. And so that's a really just a mindful time. It's something to be really mindful of when you go back to that. So I want to end on some positive things, because I feel like I've been all doom and gloom, and motherhood is not doom and gloom. My son has enabled me to fall in love with the world over and over again every single day, and I've had some pretty heavy shit go down in the last week, and I'm sorry if that came through in last week's class or this week's. It's occupying my brain at the moment, but he... this week, with everything that's going on, I just look at him and I'm so grateful for the fact that I get to experience the love I do just by looking at him, or just by cuddling him, or when he gives me a kiss. And he is just such an epic little human, and when the three of us are together, there is nothing better. That oxytocin is divine, and I look at Michael and I as parents and what our relationship holds now because of that, and it has only gotten stronger. Yes, there were a hell of a lot of hard times, and I'm sure there will be again. You know, I said to him the other day, I love you more than I've ever loved you, and it's about to turn to shit again. And I was like, yeah, I'll see you in 2 years' time, kind of thing. I'll love you again in 2 years' time, and that's pretty full on to say. We were joking about it, but it's the truth. Relationships are really, they shift from you being each other's priority to now this child being both of your main priorities, and that survival. And I can remember Mick saying, when we first had our son, at the end of this 6 months, all that matters is that we survived and we're healthy. And that was a really kind of good point to make, because it was like, yeah, as long as we're healthy and mentally and physically, and that's it, that's all that matters. And yeah, family is just, I'm so excited for all of you that are having your first babies. It is the most beautiful period. And those first 6 months of my son's life were the most euphoric, and everyone's different. Some people really struggle for those first couple of weeks. Other people struggle later on. And I hope that, these episodes, if they've, given you any information, it's that you do it your way, and you do what works for you, and you experience it as you need to experience it and what you want to experience it as. But those first 6 months were bliss. I just remember walking around being like, I'm getting paid to look after my son, and this is phenomenal. Like, I can't believe I'm so lucky to be paid maternity leave and just get paid to love and look after him. So please know that there are a lot of support services out there. Often it's just a Google search to find one. Please access support if you need it. But please, I really hope you all get to enjoy parenthood, and realise that the grass is greener on your own side when you water it. And watering it can often be done with the help of sprinklers or people that come in and service your garden for you, meaning that it doesn't just have to be done on your own. You can access help and get people to help you, and that can make the experience much more heightened. I don't know how to end this. It feels really hard. I feel like I'm breaking up with you all or something. It feels really weird. Thank you so much for being here on this ride with all these episodes. I've truly loved knowing how much you have loved them and how much they have meant to you. It's meant a lot to me that they have, and I hope that they have provided some ease and comfort during this pandemic that has brought so much uncertainty. I wish you all the best in your pregnancies, in birthing your babes and raising them. thank you for being a mother. Thank you for being a father. It's often a thankless job. And I often think of it, you know, when I see new parents, I'm like, thank you for doing what you do, because we don't hear that very often. We need to hear it. You are all doing incredible jobs growing your babies, and you'll do amazing jobs raising them. Lots of love to everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourselves, reach out for support if you need it. And please share the word about Core and Floor. Your support keeps me going and enables me to give free information. So follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and make comments and like, and buy my programs if you've got the money, please. It means I can continue to put food on my table. Thanks, team. Over and out for the last time.